Normalizing chronic fatigue while consuming a strict fitness diet is a catastrophic medical error. Millions of highly driven adults completely ignore the biological reality that their supposedly clean diet is actively destroying their neural pathways. The mainstream fitness industry aggressively promotes artificial sweeteners, sugar-free alternatives, and heavily processed protein bars, falsely labeling them as optimal fuel for human performance. In the rigorous fields of clinical psychiatry and gastroenterology, these exact ingredients are classified as slow-acting neurotoxins. The physical damage begins immediately upon ingestion, rapidly initiating a massive cascade of systemic neuroinflammation that travels directly from the stomach to the skull. These are the exact healthy foods ruining your brain. The modern industrial food matrix has simply replaced acute caloric damage with severe structural neurological decay. Those who remain willfully blind to the unfiltered clinical breakdown exposed in the next few minutes are actively choosing to accelerate their own cognitive decline. They will remain permanently trapped in a cycle of chronic lethargy, falsely believing they are executing a healthy lifestyle while their biological hardware actively rots from the inside out. How do artificial sweeteners trigger neuroinflammation? Understanding this systemic neurochemical destruction requires looking directly at the biological response to synthetic compounds. The human digestive tract is an ancient, highly sophisticated biological engine designed exclusively to process organic, recognizable molecular structures. When an individual consumes artificial sweeteners such as sucralose, aspartame, or saccharin, the body experiences a massive evolutionary mismatch. The taste buds register a hyperpalatable sensation of sweetness, sending an immediate, urgent signal to the central nervous system that a massive influx of glucose is arriving. Pancreas instantly responds by releasing large amounts of insulin into the bloodstream to manage this anticipated energy spike. However, the caloric energy never actually arrives. The artificial sweetener operates as a biological phantom. This creates a severe state of metabolic confusion. The excess insulin aggressively removes existing glucose from the bloodstream, leading to an unnatural, violent crash in blood sugar levels. The central nervous system interprets this sudden lack of cellular energy as a critical survival threat. The adrenal glands are forcefully activated, pumping high volumes of cortisol and epinephrine into the bloodstream to physically stabilize the organism. This means the simple act of consuming a zero-calorie fitness drink traps the body in a continuous high-alert stress loop. Furthermore, the brain, having been chemically deceived, drastically ramps up hunger signals, violently demanding real glucose to satisfy the initial neurological promise. The individual is left experiencing severe brain fog, extreme physical lethargy, and uncontrollable cravings, completely unaware that their expensive fitness supplement is the exact chemical trigger causing their cognitive collapse. Elite focus requires an absolute stable metabolic baseline. By relying on synthetic sweeteners, the individual is actively fracturing their metabolic stability and guaranteeing a state of sluggish, highly reactive cognitive underperformance. It causes severe intestinal perforation. The hidden truth of the modern fitness industry lies buried within the structural integrity of the intestinal wall. A biologically optimized gut lining acts as an elite, highly selective security barrier. It is composed of tightly packed cells held together by delicate protein structures known scientifically as tight junctions. This advanced barrier ensures that only fully processed, beneficial micronutrients enter the systemic circulation. However, heavily processed health foods, specifically those packed with artificial emulsifiers, thickeners, and synthetic preservatives, act as a corrosive chemical solvent inside the stomach. Emulsifiers are engineered industrially to violently bind water and fat molecules together to improve the texture and shelf life of protein bars and diet shakes. When these harsh industrial chemicals interact with the delicate mucosal layer of the intestine, they aggressively strip it away. Without this protective mucosal shield, the delicate tight junctions become severely inflamed and physically break apart. This triggers the highly dangerous clinical pathology known as intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome. The supposedly healthy fitness diet literally creates microscopic holes in the gastrointestinal tract. This catastrophic structural failure allows undigested synthetic proteins, toxic food dyes, and highly dangerous bacterial endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharides, to leak directly out of the stomach and flood the central bloodstream. The immune system, instantly detecting these foreign industrial compounds, launches a massive, violent systemic inflammatory response to neutralize the threat. The individual experiences chronic bloating, deep joint pain, and systemic physical fatigue. They falsely assume they simply train too hard at the gym or need more physical rest, completely ignoring the terrifying clinical reality that their internal organs are actively leaking highly toxic metabolic waste into their vascular system. The exact diet designed to build their physical physique is the exact mechanism actively destroying their biological foundation. How do fitness diets shatter the dopamine baseline? The psychological devastation caused by the modern health food matrix is most evident in the complete collapse of human motivation and drive. Dopamine is the absolute molecular currency of extreme ambition, fierce motivation, and high-status execution. To sustain elite cognitive dominance, the brain requires a continuous, massive supply of the precursor amino acids necessary to synthesize dopamine, specifically L-tyrosine. In a biologically optimized system, these precursors are meticulously extracted from high-quality, bioavailable nutrients by a thriving, highly active gut microbiome. However, the artificial fitness diet completely shatters this delicate biological supply chain. When the gut lining is perforated and the microbiome is decimated by synthetic emulsifiers and antimicrobial preservatives, the body physically loses the ability to properly absorb and process these vital precursor amino acids. The raw materials required to generate motivation simply cease to exist in the bloodstream. Simultaneously, the continuous violent spikes in cortisol caused by artificial sweeteners force the dopamine receptors in the prefrontal cortex to aggressively downregulate and protect themselves from the severe neurotoxicity. The receptors become severely blunted, scarred, and unresponsive. This creates a terrifying clinical outcome. The individual physically loses the primal, evolutionary drive to conquer their environment. They wake up feeling completely numb, emotionally flat, and entirely devoid of ambition. The strict discipline they once possessed completely evaporates, replaced by a desperate, constant biological need for cheap, external stimulation. Because their internal endogenous dopamine production has been chemically castrated by their diet, they instinctively turn to digital feeds, synthetic entertainment, and heavy neurostimulants simply to feel a baseline level of normal functioning. They are biologically trapped. The individual genuinely believes they are executing a high-status health routine, but their neurochemistry has been successfully downgraded to the level of a docile, highly profitable consumer. The fitness matrix has successfully hijacked their biological drive. How does toxic metabolic waste reach the brain? The severe physiological consequences of intestinal permeability do not remain localized in the lower body. This is the exact moment the fitness diet becomes a direct catalyst for early-stage neurodegenerative disease. The toxic metabolic waste and bacterial endotoxins leaking from the perforated gut travel straight upward through the cardiovascular system, moving with alarming speed toward the skull. Human brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, a highly advanced biological fortress designed exclusively to keep neurotoxins out of the central nervous system. However, this barrier is completely defenseless against chronic systemic inflammation. The constant, relentless flood of inflammatory cytokines produced by the body's immune system in response to the toxic fitness food aggressively degrades the structural integrity of the blood-brain barrier. Once this elite neurological defense system is compromised, the chemical toxins cross directly into the delicate neural networks of the prefrontal cortex. The brain instantly detects this violent invasion and deploys its internal immune cells, known as the microglia. The activated microglia rapidly release highly corrosive oxidative chemicals in a desperate attempt to destroy the invading toxins. This physiological process bathes the surrounding neurons in severe oxidative stress. The neural pathways literally become inflamed, irritated, and physically swollen. The rapid electrical signals required for high-speed problem-solving, impulse control, and memory retrieval physically misfire. This is the undeniable, terrifying biological reality of chronic brain fog. It is not merely tiredness, it is the physical sensation of the brain suffocating under a localized chemical fire. The exhausted individual attempts to push through the intense mental resistance by consuming more synthetic caffeine, blindly accelerating the oxidative damage. Operating daily with this severe level of acute neuroinflammation permanently lowers the overall cognitive ceiling and guarantees long-term intellectual decay. The mainstream narrative insists that depression, chronic anxiety, and brain fog are strictly chemical imbalances originating exclusively inside the brain. This highly profitable medical assumption completely ignores the most vital organ in clinical psychopharmacology, the enteric nervous system. A healthy human stomach operates as a massive biological factory, hosting trillions of beneficial bacterial colonies. These highly advanced organisms are solely responsible for synthesizing over 90% of the body's endogenous serotonin, the neurotransmitter responsible for emotional stability, psychological resilience, and a baseline sense of well-being. These vital bacteria require complex, natural, single-ingredient foods to survive, multiply, and function optimally. An individual adopts a modern clean eating protocol heavily reliant on chemically engineered meal replacements, synthetic protein powders, and artificially sweetened snacks. They are actively starving these critical bacterial colonies to death. Chemical preservatives designed specifically to extend the shelf life of fitness foods act as powerful broad-spectrum antimicrobial agents inside the stomach. They violently massacre the exact bacterial strains required to synthesize serotonin. As the microbiome collapses, the internal production of mood-stabilizing neurochemicals drops to near absolute zero. The individual experiences severe, inexplicable mood swings, heightened emotional reactivity, and a pervasive, paralyzing sense of anxiety. They look physically fit on the external surface, but their internal neurochemistry is entirely bankrupt. They become highly susceptible to stress and completely lose their biological resilience against adversity. Medical matrices profit from fake health. The entire matrix of the modern food, fitness, and healthcare economy is heavily dependent on keeping the global population perpetually sick, tired, and biologically compromised. Fully rested, biologically optimized human operating with a pristine gut microbiome and a highly sensitive dopamine baseline is incredibly dangerous to the established consumer status quo. They possess the vital physical energy to aggressively question authority. They have the deep, unfragmented focus required to build independent, generational wealth. They have the supreme cognitive clarity to instantly reject toxic environments, toxic products, and low-status narratives. Therefore, the industrial complex aggressively promotes the fatal illusion of modern health food. Food scientists are paid billions of dollars annually to engineer hyperpalatable processed supplements that completely bypass the brain's natural satiety signals, forcing the individual to overconsume toxic synthetic fuel under the guise of fitness. Once the individual is biologically compromised by leaky gut and severe systemic neuroinflammation, they become the ultimate compliant, highly profitable consumer. The medical establishment does not offer protocols to heal the intestinal lining or restore the microbiome. Instead, it offers highly lucrative lifelong prescriptions for synthetic antidepressants, sleep aids, and artificial focus stimulants. These pharmaceuticals merely mask the neurochemical collapse while the underlying biological rot continues to spread unimpeded. When the exhausted worker finally finishes their daily corporate grind, their cognitive defenses are completely shattered by the systemic inflammation. They do not have the residual metabolic energy to engage in preventive medicine, read complex material, or truly train their physical body. They collapse and hand their incredibly valuable attention directly over to advertisers. The attention economy seamlessly extracts billions of dollars from this state of chronic fatigue. The fatal fitness diet ensures they never possess enough biological power to actually execute an escape plan. They wake up the next day, drink their synthetic pre-workout, eat another processed protein bar, and step right back into the machine. What is the clinical protocol to heal the microbiome? The window of opportunity to reverse this severe dietary neurodegeneration is actively closing right now. Every single day spent consuming hidden industrial toxins masquerading as health food permanently accelerates the destruction of vital cognitive pathways. Ignoring the clinical reality of these toxic meals is a direct, conscious choice to accept a life of biological weakness, chronic brain fog, and low-status mediocrity. Elite performers and advanced clinical biohackers are monopolizing the exact longevity protocols required to purge these synthetic chemicals and rebuild the neuroarchitecture today. Reclaiming absolute cognitive dominance requires the total, uncompromising destruction of the modern clean eating illusion. Mainstream fitness and healthcare systems are heavily incentivized to keep the population biologically compromised and entirely dependent on synthetic solutions. Healing the shattered gut-brain axis requires executing a strict, ruthless clinical protocol before the damage to the blood-brain barrier becomes completely permanent and irreversible. This precise protocol begins with the aggressive, absolute elimination of all artificial sweeteners, chemical emulsifiers, and heavily processed fitness supplements. There is absolutely zero room for moderation when dealing with proven neurotoxins. The biological machine must be forced into a deep, sustained state of cellular autophagy through strict, clinically monitored, water-only fasting protocols. Autophagy is the body's elite internal macro-waste clearance mechanism. By completely stopping the continuous influx of digestion, the body actively hunts down and destroys the toxic metabolic waste floating in the bloodstream. This critical fasting window provides the intestinal lining the absolute silence required to physically heal, regenerate the protective mucosal layer, and permanently seal the microscopic perforations, stopping the leakage of deadly endotoxins into the brain. Furthermore, the completely decimated microbiome must be aggressively repopulated. This requires the strategic daily introduction of highly bioavailable, organic prebiotics in clinical grade, multi-strain probiotics to rapidly re-establish the precise bacterial colonies that synthesize dopamine and serotonin. The nervous system must be heavily supported with massive, precision-dosed high-quality omega-3 fatty acids to immediately suppress the acute microglial activation suffocating the prefrontal cortex. Output must be strictly managed, prioritizing unfragmented delta-wave sleep in a pitch-black, cold environment to allow the lymphatic system to aggressively flush the accumulated neurotoxins out of the skull. Transitioning away from toxic fitness foods is not a casual diet change. It is a mandatory, non-negotiable biological recalibration for anyone serious about unlocking elite cognitive performance. Understanding this classified clinical reality provides a massive evolutionary advantage, but simply knowing the truth is entirely useless without aggressive, uncompromising daily execution. The mainstream food and fitness industries rely entirely on keeping the public biologically weak, perpetually confused, and highly profitable. The exact biological loophole elite performers use to completely bypass fatigue is actively being suppressed by the algorithm. Specific microprotocols required to cleanse the microbiome, rebuild the intestinal wall, and restore dopamine synthesis are treated as classified information because an optimized, high-status human deeply threatens the established consumer economy. The window to access these daily tactical commands and reverse the structural brain damage is shrinking fast. The cost of inaction is permanent neurodegeneration, the total collapse of ambition, and surrendering thousands of hours to chronic fatigue. Subscribe to this channel right now to secure the biological baseline and permanently reject this engineered chemical deception. This protocol is the foundation, but the daily execution tactics are being released strictly through the links below. Go directly to the description immediately, apply the clinical protocols today, and reclaim absolute biological dominance before the window completely closes. Do not wait for the fitness matrix to rot the nervous system. Take absolute control.